So thank you, John and Linda, for having me here today. I'm delighted to be here and feel like it's kind of like a homecoming. It feels very, here, let me go like this, yeah. It feels like a homecoming, I think. I was telling Linda that when we lived in New York City, almost 30 years ago now, I tried to get my child into Fieldston, into the ethical culture school in New York, and then we moved here. So he got a great education here too, I think. As Linda said, I've been an environmentalist all my life. I started off as an intern for the UN Environment Program in Nairobi, Kenya in 1972 as an intern, and sort of have had that ethos of environmentalism as part of my genetic makeup. And I, like many others, saw the blue marble in 1968, you know, from space of the Earth, and said, wow, we just have to do something to protect this beautiful little spaceship that we're living on. So I've been an environmentalist all my life. I've done a lot of different things, but I have spent the last 6 years working on this project called the Cool Block, the Cool City Challenge and Cool Block. And I'm going to tell you a little bit. I've got about a 20-minute presentation, and then I'd love to hear your questions after that. So fighting climate change is definitely an ethical issue. I mean, we take up so much of the world's resources. Unfortunately, most of the people who suffer from our choices and things that we do here in America get put onto the underserved communities. They're paying the price and feeling the brunt of our decisions here. But we think, oh, we live in such a great place, it's so beautiful, but we don't realize that almost every decision that we make has an effect somewhere else. So if we want to leave the planet for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren in a way that's going to be sustainable, we all need to think about what our piece is in that. And when I was looking to make a difference in the environmental community after having done a design practice and some other things, I've been working in corporate America, I've been doing a lot of other things. I said, what can I do with my energy, this was 6 years ago, the energy that I have left, what can I do to make the biggest difference? Where can I use my energy now to make a difference? What's the leverage point? And there are really three ways you can make a difference in the environment. One is policy, which we need. We need AB 32 and plastic bag bans and all the things that we need our legislators to tell us and for system-wide change. We need good technology. We need solar panels and we need batteries and all the rest. But underneath it all is we need to change the culture. Until we change the culture, we're not going to get the demand for the technology and the policy. So it really starts with us. It starts with our choices and what we are deciding in our lives. Many cities have carbon action plans, but they don't know how to really engage with us as citizens and residents of how to actually affect that change. So while we're doing pretty well here in the Bay Area, we're all pretty enlightened about our carbon footprints and all that, and we understand that we're actually not that great. And the reason is because we have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And we travel a lot, and we eat high on the food chain, and we do all kinds of things that we know we're not supposed to do. Even though we can sort of pat ourselves on the back and think, oh, we're so much better than those people in the flyover states or wherever, actually, our carbon footprint is really pretty bad. People, when they do the program, take a carbon footprint, a personal carbon footprint, and they see exactly where their carbon is, and they're actually shocked. It's quite surprising. I don't know if you probably haven't done yours yet. It's really interesting. So I have here a video that is 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, that gives you an idea of what the program is, because we don't go in and say, hi, let's lower our carbon footprint. It's a non-starter. Most people don't wake up in the morning thinking about how they're going to lower their carbon footprint. So the program is based on something a little bit different, and it's getting at it through a different touch points for everybody. So this video will show you a little bit about where that. Let's see if I can get this to go here.
When I was growing up, you kind of relied on your neighbors.
Most people want opportunities to help each other. They just don't hear about them all the time.
Or don't feel comfortable asking somebody.
Back when I was in Ethiopia, we really have a community-based life. We don't live, very independently like we do in America. I have this motto, I live to serve. I serve my family here, and using the cool block, I can serve my neighborhood.
Where we're headed with global warming is not inevitable. We can stop it. Now I know that I can do it, and my block can do it, and that my neighborhood can do it. I want to save the planet for future generations. I have a son. He hopefully someday will have a family of his own, and they will have a family of their own. And it just goes on and on. I want the human race to continue.
I felt it before I had a kid, but now I feel that pressure even more to leave the earth for the children, hopefully in a better place than when you came into it. You want to take care of the kid more than just about anything in the world. So
one of the things that we talked about in the groups is how to organize ourselves, especially bringing together and making a community that collaborates and trades not only objects and tools, but help from one another at different times. Relying on other people, that they can check on me. It's a good thing because I might need the help.
The Cool Block program is 9 meetings over approximately 4.5 months that help people learn carbon reduction, water stewardship, disaster resiliency, livability, and empowering others. It is so simple and so profound. People want to connect with people who live in the same place.
The cities are where change is going to happen, and we can do it one neighborhood at a time.
My dream is that we'll reinvent our cities, reinvent our quality of life, reinvent the planet, and build the future that we dream of.
victory is just a matter of organization. And that's what this is. It's blocks organized, which is the most basic way you can organize beyond your own household. It can't be stopped.
So that just gives you a little insight into what we're doing. And I'm delighted that both Linda and Hillary have joined the Cool Block and are organizing their blocks now. Hillary's done it, and she's like, I don't know, Peter Pan or somebody who sprinkles this dust all over and gets it. She's been fantastic. And Linda's just about to start, Linda and John are about to start on the getting their block done. So here's the origin story. We all have things that we know we need to do, but we don't quite get around to doing it. We all know we're supposed to exercise every day and diet and breathe right and stand right and meditate and do all those things. It's not a lack of information that keeps us from doing it, because we all have that information. So what the program is based on is how do we get people to actually change their behavior of things that they want to do and they know they have to do. A lot of it is around disaster resiliency. We all know the earthquake is likely to come. We all need to be prepared, not only on our house, but on our block and our neighbors. And yet, I know, even though I lived this sustainable life, I had never done anything for an emergency for my preparedness, other than had a first aid kit and I had a fire extinguisher, a couple of basic things and some water and food, but not really prepared. Even though I knew I was supposed to. For 20 years, it's been on my to-do list. Yeah, I know I need to get to it. So what we do is we get people to change through bringing neighbors together. In this case, people that you know. They're on your street. They're not strangers, hopefully. Some of them may be, though. And we offer peer support and accountability. So you're going to have your meeting. You know the meeting's coming up. It's Monday. I haven't gotten that go bag that I'm supposed to get going for my emergency prep. I know I'm going to have to talk to my neighbors and tell them I had done it or not done it. And lo and behold, it took me only like an hour and a half maybe to put all the stuff together. It wasn't a big deal. But it had taken me 20 years and this program to actually get to do it. So what we've done with the program is 30 years worth of research on what gets people to change, how to run a meeting, how to knock on your neighbor's door. We know 90 ways not to ask your neighbor to come to a meeting. Believe me, we've tested it many, many ways. And the script goes like this, so think about whether you would come or not. So I knock on their door and say, hi, I'm Sandra from across the street. You know, ostensibly they've seen you. You're not wearing a black suit and a white tie. So I mean a black suit and a white shirt so they don't think you're a Jehovah's Witnesses and they don't think that you're going to ask them for money or for, you know, it's your neighbor. So hi, I'm Sandra from across the street. I'd like to invite you into my home for a gathering to learn about a program that's done in partnership with the city of Palo Alto. We always partner with the city. To get to know each other better as neighbors, to conserve resources for the sake of our children, and to get ready for the inevitable emergency, which we know is going to come, and figure out who on the block is the doctor, and who's got a chainsaw, and who might have, you know, whatever, a generator, who will have all those things that you know you will need in an emergency, and so that we can then help each other prepare, and we can find out who's vulnerable, and who's got kids at home, and who's got a dog, and who's, so that we're really knitted together as a team. It's at 4 o'clock on Saturday, would you come to the meeting? With that script, we actually get an enormously high percentage of people joining. Because why? Not to conserve resources. You'll notice I never said carbon, anything about carbon. Mm-hmm. It's not to conserve resources for the sake of our children, although that touches some people. It's not really for, preparing for emergencies, although many people do that because, like me, they're not prepared. But it's the human connection. It's wanting to get to know your neighbor. It's not really having those people say, well, we have a block party and I know my neighbors. It's like, this is a different level of cooperation. It's a different level of interaction. It's a different level of way of interacting with your neighbor, where you not only don't feel funny asking for the proverbial cup of sugar when you knock on their door, but you're actually connected in a way where it would be crazy not to. It's crazy to go to the store when I'm running out of, peas for my dinner, when I know that my neighbor might have some frozen peas. So it's that kind of thing that makes people want to join. And we're sort of lost a lot in our technology of thinking we have all this social network that's big and we can keep in touch with people from high school and from all over the country. But we've really lost that community and we're a tribal species. And the idea that we don't know the people intimately, really, who are sleeping 20, 30 feet from our heads is kind of a corruption of who we are. We need each other, we have to rely on each other, and we've lost that ability. So this program, getting off a bit, 30 years of research, and we know all the right size group, how to ask your neighbor to come to a meeting, and it came out of work. Al Gore did his Inconvenient Truth movie, which most of you have seen. He trained all these evangelists to go out there and spread the word, and they all said, yeah, it's great, you've told us what the problem is, but you haven't told us what to do. What are we supposed to tell people to do? And he looked out and did a research of all the programs out there around carbon reduction, and he said, this is the best one, and it was called the Low Carbon Diet, a 30-day plan to lose 5,000 pounds. And he said, this is the best program I've seen, because it's not just a list of the 101 things that you can do to save the planet, which we've all seen and we all don't really act on. It's recipes. It's first do this, then do this, then do this. And what we've added to this program is the cities have wonderful programs to help you in these actions, but people don't know about a lot of these programs. So we bring that into this. So when you say, yes, I want to do this, by the way, everybody chooses to do whatever is appropriate for their home. We're not telling anybody they have to do certain things. Everybody chooses what actions they want to take. There then is a resource for them, a local resource that's going to help them achieve that goal. So he did that program, Low Carbon Diet, which is folded into this program. The second thing is a program that he was asked after 9/11. The emergency services people in New York City said, look, we can't get to people. This is impossible. We have to go to the site of the emergency, like in 9/11, down at the World Trade Center. We need people to be helping each other. So David Gershon, you saw him in the movie, put together a program called All Together Now to train and organize blocks and floors on buildings and whatever to try and help each other in emergency prep. That's folded into here. He also did a program, a third program called Little Neighborhood, which was in Philadelphia in a very underserved community. And the police would be coming in and, cleaning out a crack house or something like that. And 3 months later, of course, the crack house was back. So he said, I think you're approaching this in the wrong way. You need to empower the people on the block to decide what they want, and then bring in the resources to do it so that they have ownership and it's their idea. That's also in this program. So on your block, what do you want? Do you want traffic calming? Do you have a problem with, we had one neighbor who had, one block, they had an elderly woman who had sort of let her garden really go. It was bad, and they thought it was a fire hazard. And they were about to call code enforcement. But instead of calling code enforcement, they got together as the team. They said, how do we deal with this? Somebody volunteered on a Saturday to go and clean it out. The city didn't have to deal with it with code enforcement. She didn't have to feel bad because the city was coming to admonish her, but it got cleaned up. They got a nice neighborly thing going. And that's the kind of stuff that's happening on the block when people are connected. So that's also in this program. So the idea is that nothing siloed, that this is all kind of a systems approach, using multiple ways in to try and get people engaged. And lo and behold, we get some great responses I'll tell you about in a moment. So what does it do? It is really about neighborliness and social cohesion. It's about that feeling of safety. These are the intrinsic motivators that are being touched by the program. So it's neighborliness, social cohesion, sense of safety, and conserving something, a legacy that's for our children, and leaving something bigger, a higher purpose than just for ourselves. And we've developed this block by block, neighbor to neighbor program. And it's not actually that hard to get people to join, as I said. We get about anywhere between 50 and 85% of a block that when you approach it and they hear about the program. Not everybody can come to the information meeting, but when they hear about the program, as you invite them into your home and tell them about it, most of them go, yeah, of course. And once they get started, it's hard to stop because people are sharing information and wisdom and all kinds of wonderful stuff that happens in the meeting for them. So they're teams of 5 to 8 people, not more than 10 on a team, because again, everything is tried and true. If you have less than 5 on a team, there's not enough energy and wisdom kind of in the group and diversity. More than 10, people can kind of sit back and not participate. They can just kind of hang out and be observers rather than participants. So we found through all the research that about 8, 9 people on a team is the optimal number. We have 9 meetings over 4.5 months, about every 2 weeks. Every team does its own schedule. And it's also shared leadership. So it's not just the block leader doing everything. Everybody takes a topic, either carbon, water, disaster prep, or block-based community building things. And we give them all the materials that they need to run a meeting. So nobody has to invent anything. It's all done for everybody. And the meetings are about an hour and a half. They tend to go a little longer because people get so engaged and so excited about some of the stuff that's going on. And there's a structure definitely to it because we want accountability. People need to be held accountable for what they said they were going to do. It's kind of like Weight Watchers or AA or something like that. You have to say, I'm going to change my light bulbs, I'm going to do whatever it is. And then the next meeting you say, well, did you get to it? And you say yes or no, and if no, you're never admonished, you're supported, saying, well, what happened? Well, I was going to go to Costco, and I didn't get to Costco, and then you're supported. Well, I'm going to Costco, I could pick up the light bulbs for you, or whatever, I could help you put them in, or whatever it is.
But you don't have to get on a scale.
Yes, but there is a scorecard that you have on the website that you're going to see how well you're doing. So, and as I said, everybody does what they want. So the proof is in the pudding. We've reduced carbon footprint per household on average of 30%, which is a lot. Now, it's not only in home efficiency, it's things like eating lower on the food chain or taking less airline trips. I've had 2 people in the last 2 weeks, I think, who said they were going to not buy, because of the program, they're not buying a second car. Their lease was up. They were not going to buy a second car. They're doing with more walking. They're biking more. They're sharing cars. They're doing Lyft every once in a while if they need one. And just think of the carbon savings of that, of realizing that you don't need to get in your car all the time. So we've got great results, which we're absolutely thrilled about. And you don't have, not everything is complicated. You can do simple things like changing your light bulbs, or just turning down the thermostat on your hot water heater from 135 degrees to 120 degrees will save you a lot of energy. And by the way, money. Eating lower on the food chain. Well, if you're a meat eater, maybe go with 2 or 3 days a week where you're not eating meat. I mean, you can eat meat the other days, but that is by far one of the largest carbon sinks that we've got. A bad carbon footprint. I was going to go to the Women's March in Washington last year, and I said, no, I'll go here in San Francisco. I don't need to go all the way to Washington. So there are ways of saving and thinking about every time I buy something, where does it come from? How did it get here? What's my use for it? What's going to happen to it when I'm done? I mean, if you say, well, you throw it away, well, there's no such thing as that. And even with all the, I walk down the street and I see these huge recycling bins full of stuff. And it's like, that's not great either. I mean, that stuff, there isn't really a market for a lot of that stuff. So do we really need to buy that? Can we borrow it from a neighbor? I need a wheelbarrow. Do I really need to buy a wheelbarrow and have it sit in my garage 99.999% of the time? Or could I borrow? Could we share things? Could we do a lot of tool sharing and things like that, so that we aren't continuing to be this kind of acquisitive society that just has a voracious appetite where we all need everything in our garages. I mean, the typical one I have is that I have an electric drill in my shed. And I bet everybody on my block has an electric drill. And I've used that electric drill once in maybe 5 or 6 years. And what I say is, I don't want the drill, I want the hole. I mean, I don't care about having the drill. But there is this thing that we have in our culture of, I have to own it because it has to be convenient. Well, not really. I mean, that's sort of something that corporate America has kind of put us into that bucket. And I know that when I am able to share something that I have, it actually makes me feel good. And we've lost that, we have the feeling, this fear of like, I don't want to ask anybody because, it's like, why not? It actually deprives them of the opportunity to share, which feels great. So how do we get that ethos more into our culture and our society? So you do everything from changing light bulbs to doing all these more in-depth things. You can get solar panels, you can buy an EV, don't get a second car, share a car with your neighbor. I mean, my car sits out there 99.999% of the time. I actually had to drive today, it was terrible.
But we carpool.
I'm realizing I'm trying to go carless just to see what it feels like, and it's actually not bad at all. It's just a shift in thinking. So,
what was the little Dracula?
Right. This one here is light bulbs.
Yeah, that's about vampire power.
It's vampire power. So that you're, when you have all your things plugged in, even though they're turned off, there's a vampire load. They're sucking things. Right. So there are these strips that you can get that will turn off everything but the most essential things when you're not needing them. Making sure I unplug my phone. After I've plugged my phone in and charged it up, I actually take the cord out of the wall because there is a slight, and it's habit. I mean, that's the other thing, is that these things, after you start doing them for a couple of weeks, they become habit and you don't even think about it. Turning off the lights when I leave a room, it's just so automatic, I don't even think about it. Yeah, so that's that. We have amazing testimonials from people who've gone through the program. I mean, I had one person say it saved his life. He was living in a cottage. He lived there for over 20 years, and he didn't know any of his neighbors, and he was really depressed. And he now has this community on the block they're a hyper, like, amazing block. They're going to the Rose and Crown every couple of weeks for beers. They're having wine and cheese. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They have a book club now. So it has brought him into the community. I had one guy in a building, it was a condo in downtown Palo Alto, and there was this kind of weird guy I'm calling 2B, I don't know what apartment number, what he was, but he kind of would never look at anybody when they walked down the hall. He never made eye contact, he never smiled or said hello, and he was kind of that weird guy. So they knocked on his door and they said, we're doing this cool block, meeting, can you come? He came. He is now Mr. Resiliency. He put notices for the escape routes in the building. He brought his water jugs that he found on Amazon or somewhere, these great water jugs. He showed them off to everybody, got them for everybody. He's no longer the weirdo in 2B, but somebody who's like, he's like fine. It's just like nobody had connected with him. They're in their building, they're putting solar panels on the building. So even though the block team is only 5 or 8 people, they're putting solar panels on for the whole building. It's a 35-unit building. They are putting big lockers in the stairwells of all the emergency stuff that everybody will need, food and water and blankets and all that kind of stuff. So they're like, think of what that little team did for this whole building. It's just been really, really spectacular. So that's it. Love to get any questions or thoughts that you have on that. We have teams starting in Palo Alto we hope in September. Mountain View is interested in getting engaged. Sunnyvale is getting engaged. We're still in the pilot phase, so we're still looking for feedback. Linda and John, you're going to have to provide a lot of feedback on what's working and what's not working so that we can help refine the program before we really scale it to California and beyond. So that's the ultimate goal, is not just Palo Alto in this Bay Area, but really getting it embedded in a lot of cities. So that's it. Or comments? Yeah.
I have just a little structural question. So is the deal that the invitations go out to the whole block in the beginning, and then the people who come get divvied up into little teams, and then there's an overall, like the teams come together?
Right, so we consider a block, it depends on your block, obviously, but corner to corner, both sides of the street. So it's the people you see, the people you're going to want to get to in an emergency, the people you're going to want to borrow the proverbial. You don't want to go 3 blocks, it's the people you see when you walk out your front door. That said, sometimes we have to go like around the corners or whatever, cool decide. There are always different things. You invite everybody on the block. You are not allowed to leave anybody out. I don't care what their lawn sign says and who they're voting for, because we had one woman, she said, I'm not inviting him, he's a Trump supporter. And I said, sorry, you invite everybody. This is about building bridges. Maybe you'll notice, you'll see he's a human being and he's got his reasons and you can talk to him and whatever. So you invite everybody on the block. They come to an information meeting. We generally get 20 people. If we say go to 30 households, of those 30 households, you're probably going to only connect with 20. Of those 20, 18 will come or 15 will come, and of those 15, you get a team. So if you have more than 10, then you can do two teams. And then everybody on that team takes a topic. So does that answer? Okay. The topic being carbon or water or emergency prep or whatever.
But you all meet together? Or?
The team meets together every 2 weeks or so, and that's where you get the accountability. So that's where I was getting like, oh my God, I gotta get my go bag together, I better do it, it's Monday and we're having a meeting tonight, so that I could tell my group, yeah, I did it. And not only that, but then I brought it and I said, here's this, and I found this, and I went to Costco, and guess what, they have this, and that kind of stuff happened, that kind of back and forth. And we have, in the teams, you want enough people who have different skill sets, so that you'll find out who's good at certain things. On one team, they said, okay, I saw my airline travel was like a major part of my carbon footprint. So being Palo Alto, they went and they researched which is the best, most efficient airline, and they reported back to the group, and now I'm trying to spread it out to the, it's Alaska Airlines, and they have the newest fleet, and they're experimenting with biofuels. So, you know, that kind of stuff is what happens in these meetings. It's pretty like, wow, this is amazing, that kind of stuff that bubbles up.
So I live in Saratoga. How do you get a city involved?
Well, talk to us. We're going to be finishing the pilot this year, I hope, and looking for other cities. We're coming with half the money, matching grants for cities to do it. We need staff in each city who knows what the community's like, the leaders in the community, what resources the Saratoga would have to get to be able to plug into the program. So we can talk about getting Saratoga. We talk to the city. We do it in partnership with the city. We have the city. What we want to do eventually with the Cool Block is not. I don't want to set up a Cool Block organization everywhere. That's not the point. The point is to embed this program in a city, in the city's department. So, because they need, the city government needs residents prepared for emergencies. They want them to lower their carbon footprints, and they want the sense of neighborliness and connectedness, and they don't have any tools to do it. So they actually love the program because it's getting a lot of stuff that they have in their mandate that they have a really hard time getting traction with their residents. So what we want is eventually to have the city hire somebody in the city to run the program. We're out of there. We teach them, give them the tools, they use the web platform, and then we're out of there. So that's why it's a partnership. It has to be a partnership with the city.
So I noticed there was someone from Los Angeles. How does a city that large?
Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. And what we're doing is we're revamping that. We're doing a smaller chunks of communities and sections because we can't do all of LA. But they're very, especially after the fires, they have been really interested in the resiliency piece. And so they're putting a lot of money into it because of the resiliency they need. And even us, yes, we probably not going to get wildfires down here. You might in Saratoga, actually, coming down from the hills. I don't know. But, the wildfires have made a big impression on people who are like, I really need to get ready. I mean, every time there's an event, people get like, oh yeah, I need to do that. But then again, you don't do it because it's just not something top of mind that you even want to think about, really, honestly.
So I live in San Jose, not as big as LA, but still similar sort of problem, I suppose, potentially breaking that up.
Yeah, we could do Willow Glen, or we could do, take a section of the city.
Okay, by district.
And by district, yeah. So that, you sort of do a pilot. We'll do a pilot with you to see how it works. Find somebody so I need somebody like me in each one of these cities to sort of organize and teach, because I can't do it all. So we'll be looking, like in San Jose, who would be the program leader there, and then we'd have that program leader teach the staff person in the city to embed it. After 3 years, we're out of there, and it's embedded in the city. Hopefully they're embedded in the city. Yeah.
I just want to say that what you're saying is music to my ears, because I think a lot of the problems that are affecting America and our culture is about the idea of not being connected with other people. I mean, yeah, the internet is one thing, but that is not action. That is not doing things together. It's not being face to face. So I think we've lost a lot of our human connections, and that has repercussions for the environment and on and on and on. So I like this. I just wanted to ask, could you tell us a little bit more about what is the scope of this organization at the present, and where do you intend to go with it? And are we talking about lots of cities or a couple cities? Or
yeah. So right now,
go nationwide. What's the idea?
So the idea eventually is take over the country. Just to get it spread out everywhere.
Dream big.
Dream big. we're following, again, everything we do is based on research and science, social sciences. There's a guy named Everett Rogers, you may not know his name, he was at Stanford, he's a social psychologist, I guess. But you know his work. He did the adoption curve of innovators, early adopters, late adopters, and laggards, and that bell-shaped curve. And he said, if an idea reaches 15% of a population, and it's good, it'll scale on its own. So you just need to get into that first 15, the early adopter, into the early adoption part of the curve, and then it'll take off. What we're going to do is put I'm a cool block signs on the blocks. What's that? Oh yeah, I did that. Oh, it's great. That kind of viral thing. Once it starts having a momentum and it goes viral. So we're trying to get into 25. A goal in each city that we're going into is to reach 25% of the blocks, which is well into the early majority. And then hope. This is an experiment. And then hope it takes off from there. So that's where our scaling strategy, we've done it in LA, San Francisco, Palo Alto. San Francisco and LA proved to be difficult. San Francisco, they already live, if you live in a city, our bottom line is the carbon stuff. You're already living a fairly low carbon lifestyle. You probably don't have a car. You're relying on walking or public transit. Your buildings are, if you're living in an apartment, multifamily unit, you're insulated on the top, bottom, and both sides. So your energy use often is less. I mean, the most sustainable place to live in the States is New York City because of the resources in the Constitution. It's amazing, but it's true. So we started with those. We got kind of like, it's just, LA, it was like you couldn't even get into people's gates because you couldn't even get to the front door. I mean, it just was like really hard. We're now working with them to do something on a different kind of level, and we're going to be doing a kind of a different experiment with them around community organizing. Santa Barbara is really interested, especially after the fire. They're like all over this, and we're moving forward with them, I hope. I've got Palo Alto here, and as I said, I have some other cities that are interested. We're starting off with pilots just to see what's the local temperature, what are the resources there locally. And then we go and then make the partnership to do 25% of their blocks, which is a lot of blocks. In Palo Alto, it's going to be about 375 blocks. And we've done about 35 or so. So we've done maybe 10% just on the pilots, but then it's going to go. And then I need to go out to places like this and to congregations and to the Elks Club and to the PTAs and all that, saying everybody needs to come. We need just 10 block leaders from this congregation or whatever. And then we hope to spread it. So that's the scaling strategy. Yeah.
So how are you funded?
So the funding is a private philanthropist. It's a woman who grew up in Palo Alto, Menlo Park. She was a supermodel, and every time they were putting the makeup on her face, she said, "This is really bad stuff. This is toxic. Don't you have anything that's natural, that functions well under lights and all that?" And they said, "No, not really." So she started a cosmetics company called Josie Marin Cosmetics, and she popularized argan. You know it? Argan oil was the thing that she brought to. Now it's everywhere, but she was the one who brought it to the U.S. as a natural product, beauty product. And so she's giving the matching fund. The reason she started the company is to try and help save the planet. And so she's doing a number of programs. This one is one, and the other one is empowering women in the third world, in Africa and India, because they're so disempowered and they can't make decisions for themselves. And finding that when you give them some agency and ability to make decisions for themselves, they are starting little businesses. They're saying to their husbands, "No, you can't drink the money that we're bringing into the house. That's for our children's education." They're starting to have some sense of what we call agency. And it's been amazing to see the work being done there. It's phenomenal.
So that's your local funding.
So
what
she's
about your national?
She's doing, well, what we're gonna do, hopefully, with this is to show cities, look, you're saving money on the emergency prep stuff. You're getting a program to do that. You're getting a program to build social cohesion, and you're getting your carbon action plans dealt with. So the cities, all they'll have to do is embed 1 or 2 staff people in the cities to do it. So it'll be up to the cities to fund it. But it shouldn't, if it's spread, it's not siloed. Like in Mountain View, they kept thinking about it as a sustainability program, and I said, don't think of it only like that, because the money shouldn't only come from sustainability. We know there isn't a whole lot of money in sustainability to support programs, but there is for resiliency, because they need it, emergency prep, and some for community building. So we're saying spread it out. All those departments should, so $150,000, $200,000 a year for you guys to hire people to put into the city is not all that much money. So we need to prove that. We have to prove the ROI. The other thing is we're working with Lawrence Berkeley Labs to prove that. So Lawrence Berkeley Labs will be working with us to see what actually happens in the city when a program like this comes in. So we'll have that data. And then cities, will say, wow, why wouldn't we do this? I mean, I talked to the mayor Friday in Mountain View. He said, why wouldn't anybody do this? I mean, this is like a no-brainer. I think it's a no-brainer for cities, but we have to give them the good data, which is why we're doing the pilots, to make sure that our data is right. Yeah.
So is Cool Blocks the name of the is that a 501c3?
It's a 501c3.
Is there a website?
There is a website, but it's pretty much closed unless you're a block leader, because if you're on the team, because it's an ecosystem that we built. There's a Cool City Challenge website, I think, which is kind of outdated by now. It's just something that I haven't been able to update.
So I'm just wondering, how is this message getting out? People like yourself going to organizations and...
Yep, and cities.
Okay.
Yep.
And so how many people like yourself are there that are willing to do what you're doing?
Hillary and I are it right now for this area.
Okay.
And again, we're just in the pilot phase, because we want to make sure it works. I don't want to roll something out and then find, oh my gosh, we didn't think of that. What are we going to do? So we're trying to get it so that as good as possible before we go out and scale it. And it's taken a while to do that. It's not easy. There's so many components to this program. It's mind-blowing.
So on our end of it then, are you looking for people to volunteer in their neighborhoods?
To be block leaders. Or to talk to, if you know somebody in your city you think would be interested. I've talked to most of the sustainability groups in this area. Cities are like all about it. And what again, we're partners with the city. This is not something, and we're coming with half the money. And we need cities to put skin in the game. Of course, we could go in and we could actually fund the whole thing. Not for every city, but for the first pilot cities. But we've done the first 2 on our own in Palo Alto, and we need the city to say, okay, this is something worthwhile, and we really want it. We want to be part of it. So we're asking for minimal amounts of money to do the pilot, and then with the assumption that they will go ahead. And if they're not willing to go for the whole Cool City Challenge of 25% of their blocks, I'm not interested in talking to them, because what's the point of doing a pilot? It's not going to do any good.
So is the pilot starting with one neighborhood?
The pilot in Palo Alto is 30, this next group will be 30 blocks. And that'll bring us up to probably about 50 or 60 60 blocks. 50 or 60 blocks will have been done. So we've already done 30. You guys are part of, you're sort of like, you're part of actually the third. But when the city finally comes up with the money and we get passed by city council, we're going to embed somebody in the city to do it. And I want them to see if they can do their 30 blocks. I don't want to give them a gift of you guys. It's like, I've already done this. So we're going to have to sort of see how we're going to work that out. But so then we'll have that database of blocks. So yeah, we're looking for, in your cities, If you're in a city that's not Palo Alto, if you're in Mountain View or Sunnyvale or any of these other cities, talk to us. Or the other thing is to spread the word. You know, you have a book club. As you're part of this community, but you also got these broader other communities that you're part of. Talk to them and say, I heard about this great program. I think it'd be great for you if you have anybody in Palo Alto that you know. You know, let me know and we can talk to them. So that's it. And yeah.
If I heard correctly, each block group chooses to focus on like one aspect of no everything.
Everything.
Okay.
Because you're touching different people have different reasons for joining.
Okay.
So, and the number one reason people join is for the social, but it's not a social hour. If it's just a social hour, you're not getting anything done. Mm-hmm. So the point is you bring them in with these other reasons for joining. Okay. And you get all the stuff done. So no, it's the 9 meetings are all that whole suite of actions that you do.
So go ahead. Sorry. So once you get through those 9 meetings, you reach a kind of sustaining period, and what goes on during that?
So it's amazing. Teams do whatever they want. We're sort of like, we did the thing, we got you the platform, you guys have now connected. As I said, some are having potlucks all the time. They're going, Hillary's group, I think, is meeting after year 1 to look at their utility bills together. They're having a lot of them are having block parties where they're inviting more neighbors in. They're doing things like tool sharing. Each team does whatever it wants.
There's no yearly program checkup or anything. You just let it run after that.
We let it run, and we want, of course, you have feedback of what's actually happening. And one of the things in the last meeting that we're going to be developing in this next group is that the city's really interesting. Is what does it mean to be a citizen in a city in the 21st century? It's not just about paying your taxes and then calling up City Hall and complaining when something doesn't, nah. It's really about getting engaged in your community in some way or another. So we're trying to encourage people to sit on a school board or do an art project with kids or whatever, but to volunteer and be part of the fabric of the community. So that's sort of in the last meeting we're trying to, and also in the last meeting it's about getting more blocks, right? So your team, do you know somebody in your book club or whatever who might be a great, trying to spread it out. Yeah.
Are you partnering with Nextdoor?
I've had talked to them about 3 or 4 years ago. They would be a natural partner because they're looking for ways to engage with their communities that's not just transactional. Because it's pretty transactional what happens. Nextdoor is great, but it's not what we're doing here. I mean, and if they wanted to deepen their roots in the community, I really should talk to them again. I just haven't had time.
Yeah, it seems like,
there'd be some good synergy. Yeah. And we're certainly going to put, as soon as we get approval from council, we'll be putting it on Nextdoor. So
I put this event on Nextdoor.
Oh, you did?
In our local.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, cool.
And then,
talk
about the follow-up in the neighborhood a little bit, since we did this in 2017. We had about 11 households on my block, so the 20 households on the block. We invited everybody. Pretty much 15 households showed up and 12 joined us, and then one guy had a stroke, so he had to unjoin. Unfortunately, it was really very sad. In terms of what happened afterwards, and John, it's a really good question, what kind of ongoing stuff we do. I think some of it we're doing informally. We have a newsletter we send out to people and say, hey, this block is doing that things. What I've seen on my block is that there's been a long tail on energy efficiency projects, for example. So one of my neighbors, they were pretty checked out, I'll tell you. They were really meeting tourists and made little snarky comments about how they weren't getting rid of their hot tub. And I'm like, dude, no one's asking you to get rid of your hot tub. But eventually, get a new cover, yes. But he was very defensive. But his wife then decided to do this major insulation project. So she came to me and a couple other neighbors and said, I'm getting insulation, you get a rebate on it. Let's get a vendor in and say, you get 3 houses, what kind of discount? Which was great. I mean, we got like a trivial 5% discount, but it felt good, and we got that done. So there's
people have been replacing appliances, and now they think a little bit more about it. They think, well, what would you? So suddenly I might be appliance expert. Well, what kind of water heater would you get? Or, I look on Consumer Reports and say, well, how about this one? So people, there's been a raised consciousness in terms of these very trivial things like when we get rid of household waste. No one ever goes alone.
Hazardous.
Hazardous household waste.
Yeah.
Or even sometimes household waste when you get like that 1 year, time of year massive pickup, people let them know so you can consolidate things. So there's a lot more of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot more kind of casual dropping by people's houses. I just see a lot more conversations. One of the things I bet a lot of you don't do is just go knock on your neighbor's door, which I now do all the time. And people knock on my door all the time. It's just something that they did in the 60s, 50s. And then I just walk over to the neighbor's house and ask them for something, and they do the same thing. And it's just nice that you know your neighbors better, and if there were an emergency, you know who's going to be there.
So we had one example of a team in the St. Francis neighborhood in Palo Alto, and their electricity went out. And so I called they were in the alpha, they were the bleeding edge, they were the alpha group, the first group that went out. So I called them up and I said, hey, I heard you had an emergency, you had a blackout, tell me what happened? How was it different having done the cool block? And he said, well, on our block, we set up WhatsApp so that only for emergencies and only for our block, so that we could all establish everybody was okay, who needed help and all that kind of stuff. So he said, so we activated that. We found out everybody was okay on the block. And I said, that's nice. And he said, but the interesting thing that happened was when the electricity went back on, it surged and it blew all their electronics and appliances. So he said, rather than have 8 people calling up the insurance company, one person volunteered to call up the insurance company, got all the information, what are they going to need, what kind of documentation, what kind of questions are they going to need answered, and that kind of thing. And another person called up the appliance store and said, if we did a group buy like Hillary's, what can we do? So when people say, 9 meetings, I can't do, we're all so busy, and I've got kids, and I've got a job. It's like you almost don't have time not to invest into this, because eventually it's going to save you a lot of time. All that stress of, I'm in New York, and there's a snowstorm, and I can't get home, and my babysitter has to leave, and I've got a kid at home. Now you have all these neighbors around who can help. So it is actually a stress reducer when you're, to your point, sort of when you have community around you, there's less stress. But people say, I don't have the time to give to this. It's like, you don't have time not to, on some level, because eventually it'll come back. Yeah.
I was wondering how well this works in poorer neighborhoods where maybe a lot of people are renting apartments.
Yeah. Well, some of it works great. Some of the system stuff may not, because if you're in a building and you're in your landlord. But what we found is if a team goes to the landlord and says, we really want an EV charger, or we really want, new window, whatever it is, that the landlords are receptive. So not always, but it's not just you going to the landlord and saying you want something, it's now the team. We have one where they're doing the landscaping, and they've changed the landscaping because the group got together and said we need better landscaping and water conservation on our block. So it really depends on the building and the block, but certainly the connection, even though there are a lot of techies who live here and they're coming for a year or 2 or 3, they still want community, right? And then we figure they're going to go off back to wherever they're going and help spread the word wherever they go. Because once you've been in a community that's really connected, it's really hard to leave. It's like, wow, I'm literally losing out by having to move. So you have one more question.
Next steps. If I'm not in Palo Alto, what are my next steps?
Well, you're in Saratoga, so we can talk. We can talk about going to the Saratoga city manager or mayor or whoever it is that you have and say, here's a program, are you interested? So we could,
And so how do I educate myself more about this before I go? I'm interested in some in-depth kind of how, like what are the 5, what do you do over the 9 weeks? That kind of stuff would be really, but you said it's not on coolblock.org.
No, I could talk to you. I mean, if you're really, really serious about it and you have a way of thinking about bringing it to Saratoga.
I have a way of thinking about bringing it to my block, and so the
yeah.
stumbling block for me
Yeah.
is this,
Right.
you have to go to Saratoga first, so
Yeah.
that's where the next steps is,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, we need a city partner. I can't do one-off blocks. It's
right.
going to be
I
really
get
hard
that.
to do one-off blocks. So, you know, let us get to the pilot phase, which will hopefully be through this next year, and then we're going to start going after some of the other cities. Because you have to embed the city programs in the program, otherwise, you know, it's just, right now you don't have an ability to, if it's just a couple of blocks, I can't put all the local resources in there. So that would be that. Thank you so much, you've been so great.